Thank you. I truly appreciate the opportunity to be here with you and discuss the Farm Bill and try to give my best prediction of what's going to happen there. But before I get started, I just want to talk a little bit, who is NASDA for those of you that are not familiar. So it's the National Association of State Departments of Ag, and we represent all the elected and appointed officials, so all the secretaries, commissioners, and directors from all 50 states plus U.S. territories as well. And our goal is truly to advocate for sound policy in Washington, D.C. for agriculture. So a brief summary here. I'm going to just go over really briefly on all the farm bills that NASDA is working on and our priorities. Then kind of like try to look back and see what do we have accomplished in the 2014 Farm Bill, especially as relates to animal health. Then move forward to what we're trying to accomplish on this current Farm Bill. And again, try to give you my best prediction from the latest conversations that is happening in D.C. on where we are at and what's next with the Farm Bill. So our board got together about 2 years ago and they voted on our policy priorities for the Farm Bill. So we came up with 7 right here. Trade and export promotion being a big one for us as well. Specialty crop block grants. We just want to make sure that the folks that are not growing traditional crops have the resources they need to be successful. Conservation programs, not necessarily advocating for a particular program, but just making sure that we have the dollars needed within that title. And also that farmers, ranchers, and growers that as they implement those programs, they have the technical assistance they need to make sure they are in compliance. Invasive species, I think you heard Undersecretary Ibaugh mention briefly today about the 10007 program. It's a very successful program for the plant pest community, so we just want to make sure that that's not touched or anything happened to that program within the Farm Bill. Always research, education, make sure that, again, we have the funding needed for agriculture research. Food safety, that's another big one as well as we go through the food modernization FISMA. I'm like blanking out on the, just making sure that folks that need to adapt to be in compliance with it also have the resources they need. And last but not least is the Animal Disease Prevention Program and what's being done there, and I'm going to dissect that one a little bit more. So looking back at the 2014 Farm Bill, traditionally the Farm Bill for the animal agriculture sector has not been an avenue for revenue support of the programs, right? So normally the crop folks are the ones that truly rely on that on the Farm Bill. That being said, on the 2014 Farm Bill, we got a big authorization for disaster assistance programs. So I think that was a huge win for the livestock, poultry, and animal agriculture sector as a whole. So the industry normally looks at this Farm Bill for leadership for animal health, trading issues. So the last one, the coal was a big one at that point in time. So any hot issues that are happening at that point in time normally get addressed during the Farm Bill. So in 2014, there was 8 provisions as relates to animal agriculture that got authorized, all within the miscellaneous title of the Farm Bill, and 5 of them were actually addressing animal health. And I'm sure that some of you guys might be extremely familiar with some of those provisions here, but the one that I truly want to highlight is the National Animal Health Lab Network, and how important that is as we try to build that effort into the 2018 Farm Bill. So what we're trying to do and how the idea came along here, about, again, 2-3 years ago, before I even was with NASDA, folks started getting together in D.C. and truly trying to brainstorm a way to come up with some sort of program that could create a more stable funding for stakeholders around the table that can address animal health, right? And the plan was truly to model a program after the 10007 program of the Farm Bill, the plant health one. Just a quick highlight of that program, but they have the first bucket is the fundings that, it's kind of like grants that goes to the state lead agencies and some other folks on the ground, and they can apply pretty much every year. So just to give an idea, last year there were 700 applications. APHA's granted 400 of those grants to state lead agencies, and they can truly tailor to what's most eminent for them on their state, right? So if you're in the animal health space, if you're close to the border to Mexico, your needs might be completely different than California, than some other folks. So with those grants, you're truly tailoring what you need and what kind of funding you're going to be focusing on. So with that, we start brainstorming. I'm sure that as the discussion that we just had here, as related to the vaccine bank, some of you are familiar with what we're trying to do. But we're trying to establish truly, it's like 3 buckets. The first one we call the prevention one, but is mimicking that grant program that I just described. So the vets, the state lead agencies, they could apply for grants within APHIS and explain what you're trying to accomplish. It might be research, whatever else is needed within your state to get to address animal health concerns, and apply for that program. APHIS is going to have some sort of like criteria on how they grant those grants to the states, and kind of like move forward from there. I think it's important to highlight that they're going to be working in collaboration with NIFA. There's already a lot of research already being done on that space, animal health with NIFA, so we don't want to duplicate or replicate anything that's already being done. The second bucket is the surveillance part, but it's truly, again, goes back to resources for the labs and making sure that everybody has the resources and the tools they need to accomplish the job, and especially in the case of like an emergency. Right now, we're advocating for mandatory funding for the labs, and we're going to talk a little bit more when I get to what is next with the Farm Bill, the funding question, and what is going to happen there. And I'm sorry, I'm kind of like going briefly here because I know that I'm preaching to the choir. You guys are familiar with some of that stuff. And the last one would be the vaccine bank, which we just had a brief discussion. The way that the language is tailored right now would be to develop an FMD vaccine bank. That would be the main priority. But as you heard under Secretary Eyeball this morning, state that first we see the vaccine bank as truly the last resource, right, in an animal health emergency. And last, after having the FMD vaccine bank, I think everybody's willing to explore what else can be added or should be added to this bank to make sure that we have the resources we need. And this is my last slide. I want to make sure that this is a conversation as well, but challenges that we see with the Farm Bill. So first, budget, right? Everybody's going to be first fighting for a piece of the pie. As you can imagine, commodity prices are low. So everybody's trying to make sure that their titles or their programs are not touched. On top of that, you have an administration that truly has made public statements as relates to cutting costs and efficiency. So every time that a big bill goes to the floor, I think we always are aware of that, and they're always trying to look to see, can we combine programs? Can we find things that are potentially be cutted or that are not truly working? Farm Bill is also a nutrition bill. I don't know if you guys have been following what's happening on the House side as relates to the bill, but a lot of discussion as relates to the nutrition title, and especially as a new proposal to the harvest box. That's a proposal that came from the administration to address the nutrition, the Title II nutrition title, and let's just say that a lot of folks are skeptical. So a lot of discussions around that. Also important to highlight that 80% of the funding to this bill goes to the nutrition title, right? So a big title, it's important that you keep the title. We had discussions before. Can you separate that, right? Can you keep nutrition title and food stamps and all of that stuff separated from the Farm Bill? And personally, and I know that you guys are going to have a panel here that might explore a little bit more of the Farm Bill and the dynamics there, but personally, I'm going to say no. We just don't have the votes. Agriculture does not have the votes to pass like major bills on Capitol Hill anymore, unfortunately. The number of representatives that represent rural areas are decreasing every year. So it's extremely important to keep that tied and make sure that urban representatives are also voting for a Farm Bill. Then timing, it goes tied with the floor time. Do we have floor time for this bill? And it ties with midterm elections. I truly believe that after June, July, we're not going to see a whole lot of action coming off of like Capitol Hill. The Farm Bill expires September 30th. So it seems like a long time away, but yet if you live in Washington, D.C., I think you can appreciate that that's not a whole lot of time if you truly want to get something done. So a lot of questions, and I heard last week that we already had some folks on the House side missing votes to go and start campaigning. So on the Senate, if you don't have the 60 votes, most likely leadership is not going to put your bill on the floor. So a lot of questions there as well. And the icing on the cake here is trade, and I'm sure that you guys all have been following what's happening with China right now. And I think that just adds more pressure to the Farm Bill, and especially some of the statements that were made recently coming out of USDA. Hey, don't worry, something is going to happen, right? The farmers, we're going to take care of the farmers. But at this point, everybody's truly speculating, what does that mean? Does that mean programs are going to be cutted in the Farm Bill? At this point, everybody's trying to truly figure out who's going to be impacted with the tariffs, right? So depending on who is impacted, how they're going to potentially tailor some of the programs. So a lot of questions there as relates to the Farm Bill. And last but not least, I have to say that there's a potential for extension of the bill as well. So if we don't get to some of the resolutions here and come up with something that is bipartisan, most likely they just could kick the can for another year and get extension of the Farm Bill.